You're listening to the Empowered to Heal podcast. I'm your host, Dina T, and I'm so excited to take you on a journey through stories of everyday experts as we share the ways we've harnessed the power inside us to improve the quality of our lives and the health of our minds. We're so excited to have you here with us and hope you feel inspired and empowered to heal. Hello, you beautiful souls. I am extremely excited and honored to introduce you guys to today's guest, Chelsea MacLeod Schultz. I heard of her through another podcast and immediately felt compelled to reach out to her and invite her onto the Empowered to Heal podcast. Chelsea is somebody that I believe everyone should have a chance to meet in this lifetime. I think that she is an individual who is sent to this earth to help us channel our inner knowings and live our truest life. Chelsea is a psychic portrait artist and an executive meditation guide who teaches that your emotions are psychic info about your past, present, and future, and they're the best news source on the planet. You see, on September 11th, 2001, when the Twin Towers crumbled, Chelsea was 12 years old. That night, she rolled over in her bed and saw a dead man who was darker than the dark standing in her doorway. And since that day, she's been talking, writing, and making psychic portraits about her daily encounters with ghosts, God, grief, archangels, and auras. She is ultimately here to pioneer divine codes of New Earth, the farm fresh future of the world, where all people are fed, clothed, and sheltered by biodynamic engineering and global governance. Not only does she do that, but she also helps seven-figure CEOs meditate to understand their emotions as psychic info about their past, present, and future, and to help them live out their masterpiece legacy to pioneer the sustainable future of New Earth. Her clients use her Chakra Speaks trademarked meditation, psychic sensing for CEOs, to permanently heal chronic pain, predict and avoid natural disasters, successfully pivot businesses in the global pandemic, and to help choose investments that return 41% in 1 year. And that's just a little bit of what she does. She's also able to help her clients connect to past loved ones and help their survivors speak with them on the other side. I was immediately drawn to Chelsea's perspective of the universe and how she communicates with the universe, and it really sparked my interest in how some skill sets and talents and blessings that people have can be seen and interpreted in a way that we fear in our world, and we shun and we change and we honestly try to medicate and make better or fix. And with that, I wanted to reach out to Chelsea to talk a little bit about that dynamic and just let her wisdom wash over us and share how she has tuned into her truest, authentic self in this world in a way that is just absolutely divine. So I will not take another minute of your time, and I'm going to go ahead and have Chelsea join us on this interview. Hi there, Chelsea. Thank you so much for joining the Empowered to Heal podcast.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I feel honored to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet and do this conversation today. I heard you on another podcast, and you were sharing so much wisdom around your natural born talents and intuition and how you've harnessed that throughout your life. And you shared some tidbits of your history that just hit me in my core. I come from working in a mental health background and working with children who have all different types of life experiences and hardships and expressions of emotions. And you described going through some of these emotional difficulties after experiencing a moment where you saw a darker than dark, shadowy figure in your room. And you knew at that point that like your intuition kicked in and your family and support system kicked in, that this was something bigger than you. And you found a way throughout your life to shift and use this skill set and talent almost in a harmonious form with who you are rather than fighting and conflicting with this scary sense of unknowing. And I want to learn all about that today and how you got there.
I'm so happy to talk to you about this. And I have to compliment you too on, it's easy to have these kinds of conversations with people like you because there's so much heart-centered empathy in your presence, in your voice. So even before we came on, when we talk about going back into childhood memories and things like that, some people have a hard time accessing those things. The body really never forgets anything. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about coming into a human body as a soul, from my experience, is that we have this weird thing in the human realm where there's this internal self that as a child, we kind of begin to act out really normally and regularly. And it feels the most like us and we don't think about it. There's no separation. At the same time, you probably know this, biologically, we're so dependent on parents and caretakers. And we know that we start to then mirror their social cues and behavior and things like that. So we have this duality that happens immediately as we come onto the planet of we have this essence, this core essence of who we are. And then we also have this influence of the nurturing and the conditioning and the many generations of, human evolution that come through not only our genetics and our parents, but, the behavioral things that we then encounter in the systems that we go through. So when we talk about all this stuff today, my experience is it's really cool to reframe that the internal experience has to be the external experience. Otherwise, that is what creates disease, disconnection, what people think of as mental illness. And I think you and I are going to create a new lens around what a mental illness might actually be through this conversation. So,
yes, great. Like you said that perfectly. I first heard your episode and I thought, like, oh my goodness, if I were working with you as a child in my previous role, everything you had described would have been housed in the lens of hallucinations and trying to understand why your brain was creating these hallucinations, what was going on and how to treat it. And the mode of action for that is usually like assessment, trying to understand, implementing coping tools. And then oftentimes it ends in psychiatric interventions and medication management in order to treat and stop those experiences from happening. And I had this like light bulb moment go off in my brain of like, oh, like, holy smokes, like she escaped that. She escaped that whole realm of being pathologized and diagnosed and medicated. And instead, you and your family and your support system found a way to understand it differently. And when I think of the system of psychology and diagnosing, what it was created for and what it has become, there's oftentimes this pull and this fight within yourself around something's not right. You need to help heal it and get better. And the energy that is brought with that is a lot of uncertainty, confusion, sometimes fear, worry. I'm different than other people. Like all of these really heavy emotions that have a feeling of negativity connected to it that creates like dis-ease, like that fighting within yourself, right? Rather than embracing and understanding and figuring out how do I use this as a part of who I am and how I experience and go through this world in a harmonious way. And you found a way to do that. Like you and your family found a way to escape that whole pathologized experience and help embody who you are, and not without difficulty. But I'm so curious to hear a little bit about your story today and really how you experienced that time of your life and how you navigated the moments of, oh, could this be a mental illness versus, wait a second, what is my intuition telling me this is? And how you bridged that gap at such a young age and how your support system did that with you.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to dive in here. So one thing to give some context is that context is really hugely important. Every single person I have ever talked to, I've worked with thousands of people, and everything from readings to coaching to meditation, all these different things over the years, is that almost every single person that I've talked to felt opposite or out of context, opposite of normal. So what felt the most like them ended up feeling like taboo and scary, and at the same time really obvious, because we don't really know that we're quote unquote good at something, or that something that's natural to us is valuable, because it feels like being ourselves in our body. It doesn't feel like efforting. It doesn't feel like trying really hard. It feels, just self in the body. So early in life, I was already having these kind of psychic quote unquote experiences, and it wasn't something that I thought about. Like I told you earlier, I really had no idea that people could lie. I didn't understand what lying was when I was really young, because I remember feeling spatially in my body very much what people were feeling when they were feeling it, and the truth of the situation around that, even if I couldn't understand what they were going through as adults, or in the system they were working and living in. But when people would ask even, how are you? And a person would say good, and I knew they weren't good, I started to question why. We live in a place where that is the standard interaction. And even as a kid, you start to internalize and think, it must just be me then. It must just be me, that I'm so different that I don't understand how it works here, even though I feel this whole other realm and reality, not just the psychic realm of, yes, like at any given time, our body is making telepathic communications with all sorts of different dimensions, including our past, present, and future, people who have passed away. So the thing that I really started to feel when I was younger was these intense emotions and these like big bouts of grief. And I was suicidal, from I think 9 years old. So it was really young that I started to feeling these overwhelming feelings in my body. What I didn't know was all information. And it was just pent up information of, if I wasn't in school having to sit quietly at my desk and be good, then I would have been outside, having conversations with nature like I did when I was a kid. I would be kind of meditating, which I didn't know I did as a kid, into the realms of past lives and other things. And I found that one of the things that makes me feel the most like me, that of course didn't feel like it would be valuable and was part of why everything felt so intense, and I went through a quote unquote awakening to like reemerge with it, is just the fact that this stuff was, the psychic stuff that was so normal for me in the blue collar, very Christian, suburban, conservative suburb I grew up outside of Detroit. I was not anybody's normal. There was no people like me as an example, except for my parents were very interested in this stuff. They had both been raised Catholic and they hated it. They had really had some significant hardships that I didn't, and so did the family, generations before that, including like financial limitations and really feeling like they were just funneled into that, like speak when you're spoken to, very much that kind of compliance kind of thing. And although they didn't necessarily fully come out of the closet spiritually or pursue this as the main kind of work that they would do, they have always been curious about these things. So their curiosity created my first support system at 9 years old, when I was having that crazy anxiety and grief, and I was looking around and no one else was feeling so intensely, or so I felt, because no one else was on the verge of tears, and what I thought was for no reason. I transitioned a lot easier because my parents would sit down and ask me about how I felt. And even before that, they would tell me that weird stuff would happen when I was drawing. I would predict things by accident. So they were just very curious about the nature of who I was. And it helped so much to allow me to find a sense of normal in who I am as an adult, despite all of the other conditioning and systems that were at play.
I really appreciate how you shared that all of the experiences and emotions that you were feeling around you was information. Yep. And pent up information. Can we talk about that a little bit more? Because that resonates so deep with me. I walk into my house and I know the second I walk in what everyone's feeling in my house. And I'll like ask my husband, like, why are you feeling that way? And he's like, I'm not. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Like, what's going on? Like, what do you need? You need to go walk away for a minute. Like I can feel it so much. And I've never taken it in the lens of like, this is all just information for me to process and decide what I want to do with it. Right. And I mean, that's how I look at any other information that comes into my life. But when it comes into the feeling or sensation of like this like wave, this tidal wave on me, typically like before I went through my own kind of healing process, I would shut down or I would question like, what's mine? What's yours? Like, I'm just taking it all off. I need to go to sleep. This is too much. Like my body would like start to like shut down and close up. And I think this is a typical experience, especially when I think of like the kids I've worked with in the past who come home and they're just overstimulated and tuckered out, and anything can be the last straw to make them blow. And then that would be looked at as like a behavioral concern, right? But I think there's a dime behind a nickel here.
Yeah, absolutely. Overstimulation is the big word. Because imagine, I'll paint a picture. Imagine you're someone like me, and all humans are actually like me. I just have this particular thing dialed up. So we can all do what I can do. The cool thing that I found about, before I illustrate my point about the body, is I never knew when I was younger how I would get information, how I would know someone was sick or like hurting a certain way without them telling me, how I would accidentally predict the truth, even when I was 3 or 4 years old. I wouldn't really know how I would feel things about people's past that they hadn't divulged to me either. So there was this timelessness to and randomness when I was young to how I would get information, or when I would be visited by people who had passed away. They weren't always associated with living people I knew. So it felt kind of chaotic when I was young. But over the years, I really decided I want to reverse engineer what is psychic, like what am I doing? And what I found is through especially reading other people and teaching them how to do this. If you ever want to learn how you do something, try and teach it and you'll figure it out pretty quickly. Is that the body is carrying all of this information, past, present, future, and we kind of already talked about it. All these things that are happening in your body, including body sensations, illness, thoughts, emotions, it's all just points of consciousness that are you connecting with other points of consciousness all through time, space, and the universe. And in a human sense, it's like the people, places, and things that you haven't even met yet are hanging out in your body. And so if we relax enough into your body, I can either read that information because I interview it just kind of like it's a person. I'll feel or see a particular thing in your body. I'll go to that location. I'll say, what are you? I want to understand you. And then if I can say it exactly as I'm feeling it, even if it doesn't make sense, it tends to be a pretty potent piece of information about that person, past, present, or future. People can also do this themselves. And the cool mechanism about it is when you go into your body, especially if you have like an illness or you have something that's like really intense going on, that part of you is a part of your consciousness that has something to say that on a physical level needs to be expressed through your body, because you're not acting through your body in the way that your soul, your essence came to. The only reason that disease is created, and the way that I see it as chakras, is because each chakra is a color, and each color is a frequency. So it vibrates at a certain rate, which makes it appear that color. When I see illness, it's literally just the chakras in places that they're not supposed to be. So the solar plexus chakra is yellow, and it's supposed to be right around the stomach area. If I see yellow up in the mind, then that's why someone has a migraine. That's why someone is having crazy rampant thoughts. It's really like very cut and dry, the way that I see it, and kind of have reverse engineered it. So when we are trying to change the internal world or repress it so that we don't have to act it out in real time, meaning even like when I feel like I need to cry and I don't cry, I'm changing what's going on internally, not allowing it to express externally, which starts to move stuff around in my body, which creates those, like, any sort of intense emotion is actually like this really pure part of who you are wanting to come out in some way. And it's probably backed up from all the other times that you haven't let yourself do whatever you needed to do in the moment. But going back to what we were talking about too, is imagine being a kid, and you don't understand this when you're young, especially, but you are the intersection of, let's say, like 13 different dimensions. So not only are you feeling like the earth beneath you and every single point of consciousness that's around you in your environment, because everything, like our bodies, is a point of consciousness. So our body is constantly having conversations with the walls in the room. You know, like you said, you walk into your house and you can feel each person, where they're at, what their mood is. That's normal. That's a normal technology of the body, and you know what we're here to do as humans. So like you said, imagine being aware of every single thing in your environment, and you're having a conversation with it, and your body just does this. Your mind doesn't need to comprehend it. It's always happening because the body knows the truth. It's very permeable. And then someone who's passed away is also coming in. And then there's an angel that is there protecting you and guiding you. And then, you know, infinite, amount of other things. Add on top of that anything else, right? Like, I need to be at a certain place at a certain time. Noise, any kind of like loud noise, or conversation, crowds. Like, it just adds more information on top of the system that's already very much processing and recognizing that it's processing a lot of these other things going on. And when you look at human history, all of the stuff that we've created that's kind of an extension of ourselves, it's synthetic. It is not making us feel closer to nature. And nature is like the big body, and we're the small bodies on top of it, you know? So we're extensions of nature. We're going back there when we die. And everything that we do to systematically disconnect ourselves or like stimulate ourselves away from nature is information, even clothing, things like that, that is extra on top of what we already are designed as. So when kids are having issues with overstimulation, it can be too for kids that are called hyperactive. They need to physically move their body in a way that they're not supposed to. And that's think about how scary it is to live in a place where it is about compliance and order over authenticity and freedom of expression in the moment. It's way harder to control. So I understand that people have that concern, but it kills the human spirit, and it creates disease, war, you know, everything that's on the planet right now that we view as negative is this disconnection from nature and the infinite self and our inherent abilities as, you know, like very advanced beings. So just a few thoughts on that.
I appreciate how you just talked about like conforming and compliance. And oftentimes, especially as a child, like that can feel like the most important thing. Like you are put on a schedule based around somebody else's needs of when you wake up, what you're going to eat when you wake up, where you're going to go, when you're going to go there, how well you're going to behave, if you're going to communicate.
Yes.
Like we tell kids all of these things and we just kind of like put them in motion on it, and we're having this for dinner, enjoy. And it's such a disconnect from tuning in with themselves and discovering who they are or what they want or how they want to show up. And if it becomes a nuisance, or if it becomes socially unacceptable, or if it becomes like something that you witness and you're like, ooh, that just doesn't feel right, or that's not appropriate, or use this, do that. We immediately redirect and we teach a lesson in that moment. And I'm sitting here as a parent, like wondering and so curious on like, what do you think are some of the best ways that we can support our kids as they're growing up, maturing, coming into themselves? And it's different. It's different than what we expected. They process their emotions differently. They express their emotions differently. They see things that we might experience as annoying or getting in the way of our end goal as the parent. Like, what do you suggest us parents do in moments like that, where we feel that sense of friction of what we feel like we have to conform as a parent and what our child is trying to blossom into?
And that's the important thing you just said, is what you have to conform to as a parent is what inherently you are going to consciously or unconsciously pass to your child in any given moment. So I have never been a parent and I can't speak to what it's like, but I can say that one of the things I'm really passionate about and I'm working towards with other people is reimagining a society where we aren't putting people from birth on a factory belt of compliance to be good workers. Think about if you did not have to think about making money or generating enough value to sustain your life and your family's life on the planet from a basic needs standpoint. You didn't have to think about where your food was coming from. You didn't have to think about where your housing was coming from. You didn't have to think about where your healthcare was coming from. How freed up and present would you be able to be with your kids, with everyone around you, with all the relationships in your life, including your relationship to the earth, your relationship to things that, you know, maybe most people think are unseen, which is God, the universe, things like that. You would be so freed up to do that. And it's not that we don't have the resources to distribute food to every person on the planet. It's not that we don't have the ability and the smarts and logistics and all the technology in the world to help with that too. We just haven't created the incentive for that to happen in the economy. So as parents in the current economy, you have to, I think, evaluate if I am hurting myself in any way, and hurting yourself looks like feeling drained. That's kind of a standard normal thing people think is, I used to think it was normal to just feel like everything was hard because it was hard to comply in school, even though I was the smart kid. It was hard to write in the style I was given. That's like research paper style, because I'm just a very like emotional, specific, descriptive person. And they teach you how to kind of even generalize your language so that you don't go into the emotion as you're talking or writing about what you're saying. So kids just need to be believed, and they need to be met where they're at in whatever it is. And having a child, from what I can see, is 100% like an inconvenience. It's not going to make your life easier. It's not going to, you know, create more efficiency or productivity in your life. And since we have a society that still is trying to hold that concept as like, that's what humans are here to do, is produce and participate and comply and do all these things, then just reframing like your own experience and saying, I need to be real with what is my value and how much do I need to do for myself that allows me to be present and curious about my child's experience in life? And I'm curious about, your interaction with your kids and how maybe you said you just got out of the mental health field. What's the limitation of the work that you were doing or the job or even your schedule, predetermining our schedules and planning everything ahead, that maybe limited you from being able to really give your child the full experience of let's like have this relationship in real time, not like you said, I'm going to put you through, it's kind of like prison. If you think about it, if you told an adult all the things that you just said, where everything's decided for you, your meals and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And the thing is, we don't realize, and I didn't for a long time either, that the hamster wheel, that we're on in terms of the job market and other things, in the economy, the way it's set up, there's very few people that win the game at the top. Those people are equally as stressed as we are at the bottom, because they're trying to control everything. At the bottom, I think most people are just complying, thinking that they're enjoying their life, and really they're not getting to have the relationships they want, the presence they want. They don't feel the access to nature that's just a completely really important and unavoidable thing that we need. So going back to the question that I asked, do you feel like working in that field and even working in general has interfered with the kind of relationship you've wanted to have with your kids?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question. And I feel like my answer starts way back to when I graduated high school. So I graduated high school in 2007. And at that point in time, I had written a poem, and it was after I had made a decision that I wanted to go to discipleship training school, and I wanted to travel the world and be exposed to different cultures and communities and experiences in life and help people feel hope and love and connection and support. And I brought that dream up to my parents, and they said no. They said, that's dangerous, and let's go to school. Right. And I brought that up then went on a summer trip to my grandparents in another state. And my grandfather talked to me, and he said, no, people who do that end up selling themselves. That's not the life you want. And so I at that point in time, and this is still one of my biggest regrets, is I decided, okay, if I want to be supported by my family, I'm going to school. And that was the first kind of pull away from myself in that moment. And it was all out of love. And it was all out of my parents wanting the best for me and the support, to support me and staying safe and healthy and having opportunities. And I think that my experience with that started then. I wrote a poem that said, at this many months old, I started going to daycare, and I went to daycare. I went to before school programs, after school programs, weekend programs. I went to summer camps for the summer, and all of these things that have a lot of pros attached to them. I had a lot of amazing life experiences, but my life was packed with learning and staying busy and on the go 24/7. And then all the way, I went into hyper gear after that. So I went to college, and I found social work, and I found that I can show people who need hope and love and connection that in a different way. And I can get an education on that. And I from the day I started college to the day I got my master's degree, it was a 4-year process. I did every summer school, winter school, advanced classes that I could do in order to get it done. And then I jumped into a career, and it completely turned the switch off on a part of me and put the high achieving, desirable perfectionist piece of me into hyper speed. And that was this huge, separation from myself. And then when I had my son, that was my first experience of being home and not working or studying or doing something. And I struggled immensely, immensely. Like the amount of anxiety that I experienced was through the roof. I could not wait to go back to work. I had intrusive thoughts like you wouldn't believe, like OCD intrusive thoughts of seeing my son dying, like hundreds of times a day. And it was like this, my brain just went crazy in that moment. And then I got back to work and I was like, all right, I have a 3-month-old. I'm figuring out daycare. I can tell when he's hungry. I can tell when he's crying. I know when he's hurt, but I'm miles away from him. My body feels connected in this crazy way. And I don't want anything to do with it. I want to work. And I worked late and I took every after hour phone call and I was on call as much as possible. And I literally made myself available to every crisis and big moment and thing, and moved through big positions and jobs and filled myself up with what was familiar and what I felt good at, and continued to close that off. And just until recently, like I've made a shift and the past, it was still in 2020 when I started taking some courses for myself. And I think that whole disconnect for myself is finally starting to like come into motion again. And I'm feeling and honoring some of these experiences that I have and understanding them differently, rather than like, oop, don't like that. That doesn't fit in with my mentality of who I am, right? Like shove that down. I want to be this person. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of been my experience with it.
It's so perfect what you said, because we have to acknowledge, in your experience, in my experience, in many people's experience, it is 100% feels like an addiction, and detoxing from an addiction, being productive, being useful, being a utility, performing through, like you said, achievement and job roles and school and things like that. The school system was actually created in the US based on studies done on rats for compliance. So it was created so that people could, the memorizing and the systematic way in which people were sitting at desks and doing these certain things. It was created so that there was compliance and there was productivity, and there was literally, like the industrial era, workers that would come out of the school system and be happy in a way, because it was a different way of life. You didn't have to work from sunup to sundown with only the people that you knew in your family. As a farmer, you had the option of, well, if I go to this place 8 hours a day, when I do go through all these schooling things, then I can have a designated time off. I can have vacation. That was the first time that, in history, people were starting to kind of commodify their time and split it up into these different categories. What you're talking about is the addiction of having the safety of your life is predetermined, or if I just perform in this way, in this class, in this job, in this thing, then I know that I'm valuable, or I can create my space in society in a way that other people will recognize. Just like you said, instead of doing it in real time, through the relationships we're having, learning very much in the moment, and only gravitating towards the stuff that feels the most like us, so that we don't have to be or do everything for everyone, which I think is a huge thing. But high achievement is generally, especially the people I work with now who are CEOs, is a coping mechanism. Like you said, coping mechanisms is not what we want. We don't want to say, for kids or adults, here's this tool so that you can keep doing the thing that's hurting you and keeping you away from the people, places, and things that you're actually meant for. We want people to be doing the things that feel the most like them and give them the social support and upliftment to grow and really thrive in those things. And I tell everybody, like you said, even in those moments with your family, you're like, if I want to be part of this family, I guess I'm going to have to do this, because it is so biologically hard for us to diverge from what we know and go into what feels the most like us. And like I talked about earlier, every single person I've talked to over, many years of doing this kind of work with people, every single person has felt those moments of trauma in their life where socially what they were was unacceptable in a way that was so painful that they then either repressed it and turned it into high achievement or something else. Or they ended up, committed in some way. And, and going back to what you said earlier, I was lucky that I was smart enough to, first of all, I had a feeling that if I had ever talked about out loud that guy standing in my doorway on September 11th, who was darker than the dark, and seeing this person who I didn't know that it was someone who had passed away. I thought maybe in the moment, I'm like, maybe I'm schizophrenic because I had obviously been familiarized with what people who are schizophrenic do and feel and see through popular culture or schooling or whatever. But when you're going into looking at people's experiences as not part of the system that's working, every person that comes onto the planet we have to adjust as if they're a puzzle piece that isn't supposed to be invalidated or erased. We're here to, I think, honestly, there's 8 billion of us, which is a lot of points of consciousness in the same kind of, we have human bodies. Underlying, we all just want to be felt and understood for that internal self and given permission for that to happen in real time externally. So even in the stuff that I've seen these very specific visions of what's happening in the next 40 years. And essentially, we're going to go back to the inherent technology of the body where people can live in harmony with nature and they feel like school is actually, teaching telepathic or actually just kind of nurturing the telepathic communication that kids have with nature, which is a cool skill to have because if like the fires in California are coming, a natural disaster is about to happen, that the weather is going to change because you're letting yourself go into the part of your body that already knows these things, then how useful would that be to create, whatever is needed at that time? We're going to live in, society where, yes, people do not have to pay to live on the planet so that they can actually have these relationships and be present instead of having this built up depression, anxiety, and other things that are just symptomatic of we're not letting ourselves actually be human. And we're commodifying things that can't really commodify the earth. Not supposed to commodify humans. It's not how we're designed. We're not formulaic. We have patterns, but there's so much infinite creativity to who we are as humans. And that was one of my favorite things I talk to all of these different points of consciousness because it's very easy for me to understand that if everything is a point of consciousness in the universe, then I can have a conversation with that consciousness. And nature once told me, because I asked nature, not the earth, but nature, what do you feel about humans? And nature was just so excited about who we are because we're pattern breakers, because we're creative, because nature never knows what we're going to do next. I thought I was going to get something so negative of like, oh, you're destroying me and, all these other things. Nature thinks that we are so fascinating. But at the same time, there was kind of this cautionary feeling of I'm going to correct what you do if it goes too far. So I won't hesitate to just kind of slam that down when it needs to, because there's other parts of the ecosystem happening here that if you don't recognize those things, then it's just a natural consequence. But we're so infinitely connected to each other and so many other things in the universe, including the earth, plants, animals. We have to start creating systems that allow us to do these things. So that's something I feel really strongly about.
Yeah. I'm sitting here listening to you and I keep wondering like the amount of people that we have in our world, especially here in like our westernized culture, that we look at and listen to and we start to question because it's different, or we lump it into symptoms of something and we label it with a diagnosis of some sort. And those people are essentially at that point in time, like handcuffed from who they really are, because everything around them is telling them that how their brain naturally is experiencing the world, or how their body's naturally experiencing the world, is wrong and not healthy and not okay, or risky, dangerous. I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but I'm curious around, like, I want to create a perception that people can move forward in life and not be preconsumed by labeling what they're experiencing or what somebody they know is experiencing, and not be consumed with fear because it's different, or because of what media or other people have told you could potentially happen, and how to channel it for the good, right? So I'm thinking of, like, kids that I've worked with that say, like, I'm seeing this shadow figure telling me to hurt myself. It's telling me to hurt myself, telling me to kill myself. And sometimes they listen. And it's so common to hear these kids that I worked with, it's so common to hear them say, like, it's telling me to hurt myself, or it's telling me to hurt somebody else. And the second we sense danger to self or others, we clamp down in a control, like control, reduce risk, like how can we help? And it's all out of, like, a good place. Like, we don't want people to suffer. We don't want anything bad to happen. We don't want kids to be, or people to be, tormented by those thoughts and feelings. But how, like, what are our other options in those moments to experience and be with a child in that moment? And I mean, I know that we can say, like, this isn't forever. Let me be with you. Help. I can provide you comfort. Let's say something to this thing to see if it can help go away. Let's say a prayer. Let's call on help from something. Let's dream something up in our brain to come in and support us and bring comfort. Let's feel our feet on the ground. Let's smell the air. Let's see that we're sitting in our room right now, or our feet are on the grass and we're outside next to a tree and we're safe. Like, we can do those grounding techniques, and we can do those orienting techniques, and we can try and create understanding in our brain to create, like, a safety net of sorts. But outside of that, it's hard to not want to fix. And as clinicians doing this work, if we want to truly be strength based, if we really believe that people have the skill inherently within them to do well, if they can, they will do well. They have all of the strengths within them to do well. We have to capitalize on those strengths, and those strengths will guide them through all the difficulties in their journey, right? They'll uphold them and carry them through that. Sometimes we need to teach them tools, but ultimately we're working through a lens trying to heal something that we deem as broken. And I'm hearing through your stories and your journey that it's not broken. It's a different experience, a different way of intaking information. What do we do in those moments? I don't know if that's the right question, but I'm trying to figure out what the right question is to, like, help us as a society move through that differently.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's those, I've dealt with a lot of dark entities, especially when they were really scary. And the moment that they arose, I started to see the pattern after the fact. You know, I would be in my room. Everybody is going to bed because they have work in the morning. I wanted to be the good kid. I did not want to wake my parents up every single night when I was having these experiences. So on the surface level, there was no real chance for me to, despite how great my parents were, they were participating in a system that their time was so scheduled out. I knew it was invasive for me to have an experience that would disrupt their schedule and what they needed to do. And so I would rather suffer that, because that's my personality type. That's not everybody's. I would rather internalize that and suffer that alone. And kids like me tended to have more suicidal tendencies. The other kids that have outward behavioral problems are doing the opposite, but essentially with the same thing, is that they're actually acting out the immense fear or separation or, disconnect that they're having. The only reason that I ever encountered these negative, deep, dark, scary things is because I was going through systematic, control of who I was. As kids, I don't know that we can really prevent that kids go through, living the lives that their parents do in our current economy. But we have to start to reimagine, like, if we're curious about each person's experience, like you said, in those moments, we just have to understand that this is coming from these two deeper layers. One layer is that the dark thing is only, I always say this, frequency matching with the person, with the child, because there is so much stuff built up in them that hasn't been able to be expressed in real time, that feels like them and is very natural to them, but isn't allowed in the current system, doesn't feel safe socially, whatever else. And then underneath that is the fact that really all of us are kind of doing that to ourselves at this point in time. So each person has a different part to play. My part to play, because what feels the most like me, is talking openly about my psychic experiences with God, grief, ghosts, all these different things. Meditating feels the most like me, and painting portraits, especially people who have passed away. So we don't all need to be out there, quote unquote, saving the world. But when kids are having these kinds of experiences, we have to start to say, what is it that feels the most like you that's not happening right now? They might not even be equipped to answer the question, but we have to, as caretakers and elders, we have to start to notice, what are we doing to this child that is prohibiting them from feeling like them? What do we notice early in life? What can we start to remember early in life that was so natural for them that we steered them away from? And if we can really start to recognize what is creating the tension and the pain and the buildup, so much so that, yes, they get launched, like I did, into this dark, veil, this layer of other things that's, yes, it's very much there. It's anything you can imagine is real. I've experienced a lot of it in the dark realm, but it was really only because, again, I was sitting through school. I was overstimulated every single day by being in, a place with thousands of other people and under fluorescent lights and in buildings made out of cinder blocks. It's these very simple and tangible things. Obviously, like I said, I grew up in a place too where the artistic, the intuitive, there was no bandwidth for that because people were factory workers and people were, blue collar and very gritty and very proud of that. I did not necessarily fit into that whole culture. So when we think about it for real, we have to go, am I, as a parent or a caretaker or an adult, willing to look at relocation, willing to look at starting to understand, which is something you and I talked about before we got on the call, that this is my feeling about what children are. Children are the manifestation of the most repressed, deepest desires of not only the parents, but every generation before that. So each person that comes onto the planet comes in with, in their DNA, in their physical body, all of these things that have wanted to be expressed through the parents in the lineage, but haven't been able to. And they also come through the lens of the parents' intentions when they were created. And we talked about this. So let's say mom got drunk and dad was, I'm going to go worst case scenario because I like to argue the, devil's advocate that's going to come up. Dad was a rapist and the intention wasn't conscious. Mom did not want to be victimized, and dad has a lot of shit repressed and, terrible in himself that he wanted to go take control from another human or innocence from another human because he can't feel his own. Even in that scenario, there's still something going on. The violence, or the trying to take control, and even the deeper layer of the symptomatic behavior of doing that is there's something very pure at the essence of each human, no matter how evil they act or what they do, that then comes through the purity of this child. And so it's difficult when we get into these really taboo subjects of saying, of course, no one should ever be victimized. Of course, no one should ever be raped. And then whatever happened earlier in that man's life should never have happened either, to encourage him into this kind of, behavior where, we can't essentially, because of the way we're all so interconnected with not only other humans, but everything else in the universe, we can never hurt something without hurting ourselves at the same time. And we can never hurt ourselves without hurting something else at the same time. So for everybody who's like me, when you think you can internalize it and take on the pain or hurt or create a disconnect in yourself, it will bleed out into your relationships, your life, and not just in an esoteric way, in like a very tangible way. So when we look at kids being these souls that come in to try to express all these repressed desires of the parents and come in through the intention of the parents in the moment of conception, then we really get to see, like, how is it that I can be curious enough about this child's experience and also notice that probably what feels like them is inherently taboo and scary for most of the social stuff that they deal with, like the people they deal with early in life. How can we start to create communities around like interest and like desire and like expression, instead of defaulting to this single home, single family, non-tribal kind of lifestyle? We have to all do it together. It's about the interconnectedness of the diversity of people all over the globe. And even when it comes down to the simplest things, sometimes people that are darker skinned relocate to very cold areas, and biologically, they're not even equipped to deal with those conditions. So even when we look at controversial stuff like that, we have to look at some of the things that are going on physically with that human, but also like on a soul level, their authentic expression being able to be nurtured at we can't let cost, we can't let profit, we can't let productivity, we can't let convenience, we can't let any of these things stand in the way of doing this, not only for kids, but for all people. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's like this self-awareness and attunement coming together to a head and recognizing that nothing else truly matters other than the experiences that we're having and we want to have in this world. Yeah. And it's interesting when you think of that, like, that's all we ever want. We want to feel at harmony and peace within our bodies and feel happiness and joy and the good emotions, love, connection, relationship, symbiotic relationships. And yet we oftentimes divide our lives up in a way that completely undermines that. Like, yes. Just a basic level, like completely undermines it. And we do it because that's how society tells you it's to be done. Even with quitting my job, that was like a painful decision because I loved the families that we got to work with. I loved the agency that I worked at. I love what they stand for. I knew that my space in the world was not that space. And I had outgrown, I've learned what I needed to learn in that experience and kind of outgrown what that role needed of me and what I felt I needed to do, right? And I took that step away. I didn't get another job. I didn't go out and find another 9-to-5 to hold me down. I did it as a leap of faith of, okay, this is what I'm feeling called to do. I'm starting a podcast, which, by the way, is not like an income. Like, it's like a passion project. And I'm currently creating something to meet the need that I saw in a way that I feel is the way I've seen, felt, and have proven over like 10 years as effective in helping parents parent better by being connected to themselves and helping
Yep.
parents work with their children who might have big behavioral struggles and have moments of self-harm, suicidal ideation, hurting other people, breaking things, addiction, depression, not wanting to get out of bed, like hyperactivity, you name it, right? All the way to like developmental delays and children with a ton of trauma. Being able to show up for them by being able to show up for yourself first so that you can show up and be the best version of yourself. And that's basically in essence what you're saying is put those pressures aside, put the societal pressures aside and some of the biases we may have around how you should be in this world, right? Or what we feel like we're fulfilling or satiating in some way. Show up as yourself and attuned with yourself and aligned with yourself and aware of what you're feeling. And that engagement and interaction will allow you to do the same for your child, who will then be able to express and be the best versions of themselves in a way that's going to be unique to them.
Yep. And your child is absolutely going to change your life because let's say my experience is right that they come in as all of the, repressed desires of you and your partner and the lineage on both sides. They are absolutely trying to help you on a soul level. You're having this relationship with this child to resolve everybody back to what feels the most like them. That is the world that I want to live in, is a world where every human on planet in their body feels the most like them and is acting through it in real time, because we're not concepts. Once someone is here, we can't effectively erase and deny and invalidate them, which we try to do in so many dimensions, so many different ways. You look at people who are homeless and people who are experiencing other difficulties, and honestly, even people that are serial killers, even Hitler, there is a pattern of systematic rejection of the things that were very pure in them, that weren't understood or valued in their community or in their immediate sphere of influence. And then terrible things happened through them because they weren't receiving the direct social empathy of other humans for an understanding of who they were and support of who they were. Even Charles Manson, all of these people, a lot of the most evil people we consider the most evil people in the world were artists and musicians and very soft, creative people that felt the most like them when they weren't like working the job and participating in society. They wanted to be recognized for these soft, human, creative things about who they were, and they didn't get that, and they took that self-loathing that happened because of social rejection, which is like just internalized. Self-loathing is like talk about self-awareness. We don't have anything but awareness of self, and then all of a sudden we have to create this whole system of self-awareness when we're adults, because yes, we have done in so many generations these kind of things that separate each person from who they are and make them feel not okay to be that thing. So, beyond self-awareness, we need this community style readjustment of, I am in the transition of my life right now, going to live in conscious community, a little bit more connected to the earth and things like that. And it's because it's not the easy thing to do. It's in a way easier to have your own living situation and simplify down to just a few people that you interact with outside of work, and creating this kind of job and lifestyle where everything's kind of predetermined for you. But I don't survive well, and neither do most people who experience the reality that I do. In anything where I have to show up or do something at any given point in time on cue or in a way to produce something specific for people. So when you start to treat yourself this way, where you're like, okay, there's not anything wrong with me. What if I'm just curious about all these things that feel natural to me, that aren't legal where I live? Like being naked in nature is one of those things. That's why I cannot continue to live where I grew up, because there's stuff that essentially feels so much like me that is very unlawful or taboo in the places that I have lived. So, when we come back to what you're talking about, all of this stuff is so tangible. It's not like out there to say, like, let's treat each person on the planet as if they come with a piece of the puzzle. And instead of playing musical chairs and sitting in somebody else's seat, we tend to go towards stuff that feels a little bit less vulnerable and risky, because it doesn't hurt as bad if we get rejected about it. Or if we super achieve, then no one can deny that we're valuable. You and I have that in common. And it's really a mode that I went into a lot in the past. But if we start to create these places, these conversations even, where when you ask yourself in every moment, what feels the most like me, it's going to lead you to do things that are, yes, very detox symptomy. It feels really difficult. It feels, it's hard because it's uncertain, but it will feel so purifying, and it will bring you back to feeling like, oh gosh, I think I was just inside. I was always this person. I was right the whole time. I was always here with these things. There is places and people and things that want me this way. And by doing and being those things, I find the match for me, instead of doing and being all these other things I think I have to be. So what you did is really important. Take a step back and stop participating in some of the stuff that maybe you can trace back to not feeling so much like you, or all that kind of stuff.
You also made me think about, so you talked about the social rejection. And even as parents, if we can be that for our kids, our children come of an age where parents and parental influence decreases and social and peer influence increases. And at that shift in the game, our development of our own identity is very influential, fragile. It's all kind of out on the line, like our brain's starting to develop and mature in this way. And we're seeing things outside of ourselves, and we want to fit in, we want to belong. We don't want to be the oddball out. And then all of a sudden peer influence becomes the most important thing. And our family's scoot to the side. And that's the most painful part right there in our peer development, because people can be very harsh at that stage of the game. Peers can be very harsh when you don't align and you don't fit in. And I was thinking about what you shared around the social rejection, and as parents, maintaining a steady Eddie approach to how you show up for your kids, knowing that you're not the only answer. You're not going to be the only support system. The rest of the world will influence. Yeah. The rest of the world and society and peers will influence your child. And you just got to kind of continue to show up in that way to show them that the foundation is true and follow that foundation. And at the same time, when you brought up the shared living communities, so I've thought about this a lot, and I've wanted to be a part of this. And I have a whole dream neighborhood with my best friends around we're meant to live together. We're meant to be close to each other. We're meant to garden together. And all of these things where we feel close together, rather than where I live is Arizona. And how Arizona is set up is most of the neighborhoods are all HOAs, and they're stucco concrete houses that are stuck together with cinder block walls all the way around for your backyard. And you pull open to your house, and you open your garage, and you go in and you close your garage. And sometimes you wave to your neighbors, but usually you're just I'm just going to wave, and hopefully it doesn't lead to a conversation. And you close the garage and you go inside and you're siloed out in this I don't know, individualized experience. And then you send your kids off to school, and the people in the the peers in the classroom have similar experiences and may come from different backgrounds. And it just makes me think like how we raise our kids and the systems we insert them into, those beliefs matter too. And sending our child off to school or daycare or wherever they might go while you work, the influence of that will be out of your control and will have its own effect no matter what you do as a parent. And I think that's just something to be aware of and not force ourselves as parents to feel like we have to own or control, but influence how we want our children to be raised. And I wish there was more opportunities in the community for schooling to be like nature led, like forest schools, right? Kindergarten in the forest, like things to teach the foundations of that. But
and that's absolutely the future. What you're talking about is the future, because loneliness is the biggest epidemic on the planet. And sometimes we're lonely for the self that we don't get to express in real time that feels true. And sometimes we're lonely for the people that, when we do express that self, need to be there in our life to go, wow, that's so cool. When it feels in most other places, maybe the opposite. We don't get to feel excited that we're this person, or accepted or understood, or even just people that are curious. I think that what you're talking about exactly is the unsustainable part. Most people, even that aren't having this kind of conversation, are still suffering the effects of going into the, like you said, each home, individualized, not knowing your neighbors, not living in this we're a herd species by nature. We need each other. And as much as I've tried to make myself alone in this life because it felt safer, it amplifies these intense emotions, these spiritual experiences, because it isn't meant to be something experienced alone. It is, the bigger the feeling in your body, the more information that is of people, places, and things that you're meant to be connecting to, like in real time, physically, through conversation, through touch, through this sensory, very like grounded stuff. So what you said is just the hugest thing. Society will change because it has to, because we can't continue to sustain what we think is freedom, but is actually kind of this systematic like conveyor belt of conceptual human and not actual real human. And another thing you said that's important is, in answering that earlier question too, about kids who might be having the shadow experiences, they need to be with kids their age, no matter what age they are, that have the same experiences. That was something that I didn't necessarily have access to because my parents didn't have a lot of resources. I was born in '89. So, they had the books they read, they had stuff they had heard about. My mom took me to adults like energy healers and stuff, which is amazing, who validated my experiences. But I really needed kids that were experiencing the same thing. I didn't get that until high school. And that's when I started to thrive, when I could say in real time, I feel like your knee is messed up. And they're like, yeah, like I have to have surgery on it. Because I was with other kids who were curious enough about this stuff, or having similar psychic, spiritual experiences. I started creating social gatherings around, Ghost Hunters, the TV show, and other things, because I realized if I just led with my weird and other people would interact with that, I could start to not only refine my abilities, but just return back to my state of innocence. That was, this stuff isn't magic to me. It's just the science of who I am, and it's what makes me feel like myself. And everybody has their own version of that. So imagine a world where everyone embraced that aspect of them. They're not trying to do any other thing. And then we all just naturally gravitate towards the people, places, and things that, I don't have to be with all spiritual people all the time. I have really good friends that are ecologists and social scientists, because when you just are, so fully yourself and you're willing to be the taboo version of you, and lean into the scary stuff in the moment, then you just tend to overlap with people who are doing the same in their own way. Nobody has to take anybody else's job, or whatever place on the planet. But kids need to be with people that are their age, and they need to be believed. So even if the experience seems like wildly ununderstandable or crazy or whatever, they need to be believed. Another thing that I've seen about parents and parenting that seems like it feels right, even though I can't speak from experience, is that you as the parent have to show up as a actual human being that has needs and wants, who early on the child can understand that there is an exchange happening, not like, oh, because I birthed you, you owe me, but an exchange like, I am overwhelmed right now as a parent. I'm feeling all of these things. I understand that you're having feelings as well. What can we do to meet in the middle? Starting to give kids the skills that like they don't need to be sheltered from the human experience of, being an adult or the stresses of the modern world. I think that they need to know that there's a relationship happening, and what they give or what they consider, without obviously dumping your problems or, putting responsibility on the kid that they're not ready for. Just to start to understand, though, that everything is a relationship and there's a two-way exchange going on. It's not just you giving all of what you can or not in the moments that you can't to your kid, and them feeling like the shock of so much space for themselves, and then the restricted schedule, and then you love them so much in one moment and are so stressed in another moment you can't. It's confusing for them.
I think that's a beautiful tidbit right there. Like, I feel like that resonates so deep with me. And that's something that I think also equates to the sense of like our own ability to regulate our emotions as an adult and recognize like how we show up in sharing and role modeling those instances in exchanges with our kids.
Yeah, you don't have to be a superhero or a superhuman, because when you do that, it's a law of the universe that I've experienced many times. Anything that you do, even if it's small, tiny little thing, in an extreme is going to come back as the other extreme, and it's going to come out of you. So you want to be a superhero parent and not let your kid, quote unquote, have anything to worry about. First of all, that kid is going to feel the void of not being part of a community where they get to contribute. And second of all, you are at some point going to be overloaded by trying to be the superhuman archetype. And you're going to do something unconsciously that makes that child feel bad for wanting anything from you. So when it is difficult, be honest and try to be, able to have a two-way relationship with your child. I think that you're someone who seems like you feel like you're, like you said, you're learning just as much from your son appearing on the planet, much less I'm sure there's more depth to who he is and how you interact with him and what he really needs, and how that might challenge you to do things differently. But it's a two-way relationship. And if kids get to feel like they're part of something because they're not being so protected from all the responsibility of life, I think that helps a lot, so that we don't continue to create these systems of insane performance, or, just the way that we treat ourselves and humans in the system that we have. It starts with these one-on-one relationships, and it builds from there.
Chelsea, thank you so much for imparting all of your wisdom on us today. This conversation, I don't want it to end. I could talk to you all day long. It's been amazing. And I truly appreciate how genuine you are in showing up authentically as yourself and seeing every human being and having the potential to do that, the same thing, in a way that our world will be better. Like, if we all show up genuinely ourselves and we stop judging and putting pressure on ourselves and allowing ourselves to be our own kind of weird, like we can be cherished and we can thrive.
Yep. It won't be less hard, but it will be more fulfilling. And I think just settled and open and loving. So I think that's what we're aiming for. At least I am. Like I said, just a world where everybody feels the most like them, and there's a space for people to be that socially is what else is necessary? What else would I want to do in this life other than that? So same as well to you. It's really easy to have these conversations with people like you who have done some of the hard stuff and have gone through the gauntlet of detoxing out the, unrealistic, unhuman things that happen in society to a lot of us. So absolutely happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you are feeling inspired and empowered in your own healing journey. I know that many of you listening might be reflecting on your own stories that you may feel called to share. If so, please reach out to me at dinat@empowertoheal.com. That's DENAT@empower2heal.com. Or drop me a message through my Instagram handle at empower2heal. I would love to connect with you and learn about your journeys so that we can hopefully continue to spread these powerful life lessons on empowering ourselves to heal. My contacts will also be linked in the show notes below so that you can easily find me. We are so eager to start a movement in showcasing the many ways we can heal. And you can be part of this movement too by capturing images and tagging them #empower2heal on Instagram. We look forward to seeing all the ways that you are empowered to heal. I love you, beautiful souls, and thank you so much. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and review.